Hello, and welcome to another NABBW Financial Podcast. Tonight, I'm with regular guest Pam Sams to discuss the basics of long-term care, our August topic. And Pam, you asked me when we last discussed this, and I checked, it was November of 2019. And at that time, we were more focused on theory. We were talking about the potential need for long-term care insurance. But
Yes.
tonight we're going to get more specific and really dig into what I used to call the nitty gritty so we can
hmm
make informed decisions. When I first began thinking about my experiences with long term care, or LTC as some people call it, I began thinking about what would have to change in my life if I were to become seriously ill with a chronic situation like such as dementia, or if I were to become physically disabled. And I can kind of imagine this because I know how our life was disrupted for the year when I had my two knee replacement surgeries. But when that happened, we knew it was just a matter of time and a lot of physical therapy before I would be back to normal. So all that was required of us as a family was time, some friends who volunteered to do some of the running, and a wonderful neighbor who drove me to all my physical therapy appointments, and a fair amount of money, I have to admit, which got spent on paying people to do all the cooking and cleaning chores that I normally had handled. But as I said, that was a short-term situation, not like this is what I will be living with for the rest of my life. However, I do have some experience with long-term care situations because my mother was in need of long-term care for several years with no family member living close enough to offer any help. We eventually had to move her out of her home and into a facility where a full staff was available to help care for her. Thankfully, she lived in a continuing care retirement community, so all we had to do was move her from one building to another, as opposed to what you were telling me, Pam, about how
hmm
this decision came upon you and you had to find a place that had decent care and an available bed.
hmm
But we didn't have to start at square one, which is lucky because
Yeah.
trying to find a room can be a really challenging situation.
hmm
Unfortunately, my mother's transition happened during the time of COVID lockdown. So for quite a while, we kids couldn't even go visit her, which made dealing with her care needs even more challenging. I was the family contact point, so I had to be able to rely on knowing what was going on based on phone calls from her and emailed reports from the staff. The staff really didn't ever call me; they sent me emails to know what she needed. And managing her long-term care essentially became an unpaid full-time job for me. That 18-month experience is why I'm very aware that long-term care is something we all need to talk about and plan for now before it's needed. And it's why I'm so delighted, Pam, that you have selected this to have as our discussion tonight. But
hmm
I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. Audience, before Pam and I dive into our August discussion, let me tell you a little bit about us. I'm Ann Holmes, your moderator and the boomer in chief of the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, an organization dedicated to educating and empowering women at midlife and beyond. And with me is Pamela J. Sams, BFA, CRPC, MBA, and trusted advisor to professional women. Pam is a chartered retirement planning counselor and NABBW's retirement planning associate. An expert in personal finance, Pam is president of Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies in Herndon, Virginia. And together we bring you a monthly discussion of important information related to money and financial planning. So I want to welcome everyone. We're so glad that you joined us. And there's one more thing that I need to do before, and that's to make us legal here with me playing this audio.
Securities offered through Securities America Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer. Member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Incorporated, a SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Pamela Sams, investment advisor representative. Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies, Securities America Incorporated, and all other entities named are separate entities.
All right, we're official now. So thanks, Pam, for joining us.
Yes. Thanks for having me once again. Another very, very important topic. Just listening to you with your situation and as I shared with you and sharing with our listeners as well, you never really understand the importance of long-term care until you're actually in a situation where you have to deal with it with an aging parent. So Just recently having to deal with, transferring my mother into a hospice facility from an assisted living facility, and some of the challenges and some of the gaps that you see in the system. I like to use my voice and my platform as a means to educate as I'm going through it in real time as well, to really stress the importance of having a game plan when it comes to this for yourself, for any aging parents, and then kind of know the ins and outs. You may not be an expert, but really know what you need to be looking for and some of the things that come with long-term care.
Well, I'm sorry that you're having to go through the situation, but having it so fresh in your mind and so personal to you, I'm sure that you're going to really tell us what we need to know here today. And I'm going to start by assuming that assuring our listeners that if they haven't yet given serious thought to long-term care, whether for a parent, a spouse, or themselves, Pam is here to help us tonight. She has 7 points she will be covering, designed to lead us through the process of planning for a potential need for long-term care, and she'll help us to get on the right track. Plus, since I know Pam, she'll probably be able to recommend some books, checklists, websites, or tools that can help you can refer to after the call that can help you to make the best decisions for your situation. So I'm anxious to get going, Pam. And your first point is start with the basics. What is long-term care?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it earlier. It's also called, or people may refer to it as LTC, long-term care, kind of the initials. But it's really the care that you need in the event that you're unable to take care of yourself. The way that they describe it is that there's 6 ADLs that we have, basically the daily living. So if you're not able to feed yourself, dress yourself, go to the bathroom, things like that, 2 out of those 6 ADLs would qualify you for long-term care, which could be a variety of different types of care. There's kind of 3 major stages or 3 levels of it. You have independent living. I'm sure, Anne, your mother at some point was in a facility that she was able to take care of herself, kind of independent, but maybe needed something somewhere in there as a guide to check in. Then you have assisted living, and then of course you have skilled nursing care, and some of the other things. So there are some things that you need to think about when you're considering long-term care. If you're not able to take care of at least 2 of those 6 ADLs, that's when you qualify for long-term care. And I always really express to people is that a lot of times people think of long-term care or LTC as old people insurance. At any point in time, any one of us could qualify for long-term care if we're unable to perform at least 2 of those. I always like to use the example, and I know it may be an older example. If anybody remembers, Superman Christopher Reeves, he had an accident, became quadriplegic at some point after falling from a horse. An accident. He was well uh, earlier in age than quote unquote old people insurance. So at any point, if you're unable to perform some of these duties, you may need to have assisted living or skilled nursing care in a long-term care situation. So that's what long-term care would be.
All right. So how does it work?
Yes. So like I said, once you qualify for that, then that's where you are into a long-term care situation. For the most part, you would want some type of insurance to pay for it, or you basically pay out of pocket for that. And I know a lot of the questions that I sent over and the things we'll be talking about kind of merge in terms of questions. So I'll kind of cover a lot of different things in one question. But as you qualify for that particular need, and how it works is that when you have the 2 ADLs, you would either qualify for it, you would have to either pay out of pocket or maybe have some type of insurance, and or a Medicare could cover some of that as well. But that's how it would work, is that once your doctor classified is that you have at least 2 of those 6, you cannot perform at least 2 of those 6 ADLs, then that's when you would qualify for a long-term care situation. So it really just kind of depends at that point how you want to pay for the care for long-term care.
All right. Well, I have a friend I've been doing another project with, and in the course of our conversation over the past 6 or 8 months, I've gathered that he and his wife have chosen to take care of her mother at their home. So some type of long-term cares can be home care and some can be institutional. And I think that you wanted to talk to us a little bit about the difference between those.
Exactly. For the most part, when you experience a long-term care situation, you would not want to go to a facility. You do want to have care in your home. That's where you're familiar. That's where you want to stay. You're comfortable for long-term care. So you may have, if you do what they call home long-term care, could have a nurse come in a few times a week to check in on you to make sure that you are comfortable, you're getting the needs that you have. If you have any meds that you need to take or different things that you need to eat or things like that, then you could have somebody come in to take care of you. You also have, what they call respite care. So you have a caregiver who takes care of you, maybe a family member, but your family member, unless they're actually qualified to do that 24/7, they're going to need some type of relief. So that's where respite care comes in. And so some of the insurance programs would cover the relief of a caregiver. And so somebody may come to do the chores, clean the house, make sure the dishes are done, things like that, in order to make sure that the home stay is as comfortable as possible. Versus having to go into a facility. And so, I'll talk a little bit about insurance programs later, but depending on what type you get, some is covered through home care and some really kind of force you into a facility type of situation. So when you're evaluating, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, you want to see what types of programs are available to you, at least give you some options. So the facilities is that the care would be performed in an assisted living facility or assisted living or a skilled nursing care. And so that's where I was talking about before, with my mom trying to find a facility that would be able to provide this level of service, and also something that you would want to put your loved one in. There's a lot of different programs that are out there in facilities. Some are good, some are bad. You just want to make sure you evaluate and you interview and you take a look at them before you do for yourself and or for your aging parent. But that would be an institution versus the home care that you could get through a long-term care program.
All right. Now, when I was going to have those knee surgeries, I had to have a social worker, I think it was a social worker, came into my house and inspected my house to make sure that my house was safe for me to return home to. And they looked for things like throw rugs that you might find as a tripping hazard and that sort of thing. So if you go with the home care situation, is there a regulation that says that your home has to pass any kind of inspection like that?
Yeah, and so if you do the home, like you said, that you are assigned a social worker who will come in and evaluate. That was kind of the first thing when we decided as a family that mom had to go into a facility versus staying at home. Is because she was living by herself for a longer period of time after my dad had passed away. And it just wasn't safe anymore with her with the dementia that she had, not remembering things, not remembering to turn things off, stuff like that. It just became unsafe to stay at home. So a social worker will come in, will be assigned to you, and then they're able to determine, are you able to stay or receive care? Are you able to, in my mother's situation, are you able to take care of yourself in at home? And if not, then that's when they would recommend an institution or a facility versus staying at home.
Okay. Now, the next point on your list of topics for us to discuss is titled Medicare Misconception. So,
Yes, because like I said, unless you're into it in real time or you have experienced it or know somebody who has gone through it, most people will think, oh, doesn't Medicare cover my long-term care? To an extent.
mhm,
So you paid into Medicare, assuming that it's going to be your health insurance at age 65, and we've had Medicare discussions before, and that that's kind of the I wouldn't call it universal, but the healthcare program once you age into Medicare at age 65. So most people just assume that long-term care is going to be covered through Medicare. Medicare does cover a small portion of long-term care, which is about 100 days. And then after that, you don't have any long-term care provided to you through Medicare anymore. So
at all,
either
not just for
at
a
all,
year, but at all.
no, at all. You use
Okay.
100 days, that's it for that. So if you use all your time up, that's where you either out of pocket or the insurance would be able to cover the rest of your long-term care needs. So
Hmm.
that's kind of like I said, the misconception is that Medicare will not cover a full long-term care stay, just the first 100 days. And then I believe it may be a copay associated with that, depending on if you go to a hospital or if you're at home. So definitely check with Medicare. It's called Centers of Medicare Services. But I just wanted to stress that the misconception is that Medicare will cover your long-term care, and it does not cover all of it. So after the first 100 days, you do need to have a game plan on how you will pay for care after that time period where Medicare is used up in a long-term care situation.
All right. Well, now, next on your list is Medicaid.
Yes, so Medicaid, that's the program that if you're not able to pay out of pocket, you can qualify for what they call state aid through Medicaid. And like I explained to in various different seminars that I do, Medicaid is a system that will pay for it, but the process is grueling. I don't wish it on my worst enemy because you do have to qualify for it, which means you cannot have any assets above $2,000. And I want to reiterate, $2,000 is the only thing you're allowed to have to qualify for Medicaid. So if you have a lot of assets, either you have to spend them down in order to qualify, or that's not going to be an option for you. It takes a long time for paperwork, as any government situation where you fill out paperwork. It's usually about 90 days to go through all of the red tape and the paperwork and to qualify, and then you have to do that each year to remain Medicaid eligible for that. So that's the process. Unfortunately, we had to go through with my mom several years ago when we needed to put her into an assisted living facility to qualify for Medicaid. So, going through the resources, seeing if there was that. We had some hiccups with stimulus money being sent out, and then she
Hmm.
being over that, and then we have to spend it down, and it's a whole big old thing that you have to go through. But that's where you could pay for Medicare. I'm sorry, you could pay for long-term care if you qualify for Medicaid. But like I said, if you have talking to the audience here, if you have a fair amount of assets, that may not be an option for you because going all the way down from, having a lot of assets to $2,000 may not be feasible for you.
So
If
that
you're in a,
2,000
yeah.
is
Mhm. Go ahead.
including your home. You would have to sell your home.
You would have if you had to, you could stay in your home, but it couldn't have any equity. You may have to do like a reverse mortgage or something different where you're able to do that. But they let you stay in a home, but the 2,000 of assets with that. So that's where, you can't have like, big IRAs or stocks and bonds and all of
Hmm.
those sort of things. So that's the thing about Medicaid is that it's almost destitute, $2,000 for that. My mom was still living in an apartment, so we didn't have to worry about a home, but we did have to worry about some things like cash value life insurance or um, the stimulus money or excess Social Security tax returns, all of those things, because any dollar over that $2,000, even that next dollar, could kick you out of a Medicaid situation. So you want to monitor that appropriately if you are in that situation, and you do have to qualify year after year for that, and they do look. So that's what Medicaid would, and that could cover a long-term care situation.
All right. Well, the next thing on your list is long-term care policies, coverage, and costs. And I think if I remember back to the 2019 call, at that time we were deciding whether long-term care insurance was worth it because it's such a expensive thing to
Yeah,
purchase.
it is, and and probably this about the same, and since that time period. But statistically, and I'm reading back or thinking back to the numbers, 2021, the average cost of a long-term care in the U.S., depending on where you are, could range from 20,280 up to about 108,000 in US dollars, depending on the type of care. You know, I mean, we have independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, hospice care, things like that. So it has a variety range. So wherever you are, you want to kind of see the average in that. So my mom's in the state of Missouri, and going through the process with her with the assisted living and the hospice care, it's probably averaging about 30,000 for that annually, um, maybe a little bit more, because I did take a look. It was about 200, 220 a day, if you wanted a private room, which we did. So that's kind of where you want to just take a look at what the costs are going to be in your particular area. Because, like I said, I gave you the ranges 20,000 up to 100,000, that the level of care, but it also depends on where you are in the country as well. So the Midwest may be a little bit cheaper than where I am at in Northern Virginia, outside of DC, where the average stay is probably more like 80,000, 90,000 a year, for costs for care.
Mhm.
And that could be just a regular facility, not the kind of the top of the line facility that you would do. So when you start looking for policies, and we had this conversation before, Ann, is that the premiums are going up because it's and you deal with boomers all the time, and is that the boomers is a large generation. So
Mhm.
going through the system and needing care, the insurance companies, probably the actuaries, didn't accommodate or think about there's large pools of people turning 65 needing in going through the system where they would need care. And so at some point, the insurance companies, a lot of them got out of the business of long-term care, because it was just they weren't making any money, too many claims coming in. And so a lot of the carriers said, okay, we can't make any money at this. And so they stopped.
Mhm.
Or they kept raising premiums. There may be a few carriers that are still in the market, but every year, I have clients that I have provided long-term care solutions to them several years ago, and now they're getting letters saying, "Hey, we may have to raise the premiums X amount of dollars, or lower the care, or however you want to deal with it." But the policies could be a little bit more expensive than they were before. Um, where you want to take a look at when you're looking at a policy is what the per day cost is. So I mentioned $220 a day is kind of the range. So anywhere between $100 a day to roughly 220 or 250, and anywhere in between is what the way they price long-term care insurance. So the per day cost of how much it's going to take care of you in a facility, or have a nurse come into your home if you're doing home care for that. So you want to look at a policy that will be able to cover the basics of that. Like I said, the $100 a day versus the 220 a day, depending on the facility and what it covers. But you want to be somewhere in that range, nothing less than 100, and probably you don't really need to be on the higher end of the to 28 or somewhere in between. So when you're pricing or looking at a long-term care policy, number one, you want to look at how much it's going to cover per day for the care. And
Mhm.
then you also want to make sure it has some type of inflation rider, because $200 a day in 2022 is different than if you need care in 2040, 20 years from
Mhm.
now, inflation, and we know we're experiencing inflation now, what that's going to be. So some type of inflation rider on there. And then of course, how long the care is going to cover. When the policies were first issued with, like I said, a lot of these life insurance, I mean, the long-term care insurance providers or carriers, they were providing long-term care kind of unlimited. And that's where things went wrong too. Is that you provide unlimited care at a certain rate, it's not going to work out too well for the insurance company. So they said, we're not making any money, we're going to get out. So for the most part, um, the average nursing home care or care for long-term care is anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So that's where most of the policies will look at, is covering a long-term care for at least situation for at least 3 years, or maybe five on the higher end of that. So you want to take a look at pricing it out with uh, whatever daily benefit amount you want, the inflation rider, or the basically the adjusted cost for inflation, and then also how long is the stay going to be for that, either, and also in home and facility. So like I was mentioning before, some carriers will only cover care in a facility. So you want to take a look at what policies would cover. So if you want to stay at your home, which for the most part, most people want to stay at home first before they have to go into a facility, you want to
Mhm.
make sure that carrier is going to cover a home care situation versus forcing you to go, or forcing your parent or your aging parent into a facility first before they would pay out. So those are some of the things that you want to take a look at. Now, long-term care goes up after a certain period of time. Usually, kind of the break point is if you don't have it before 55, it kind of starts creeping up on you in terms of costs for that. So the average kind of single male or female, maybe about 3,500 for the year, maybe closer to 4,000. Uh, and that's single. That's not covering both couple for that. And so that's where the cost could be at 55. So it goes up, like I said, after that. And then at some point, as we had mentioned before in a previous call, and it just becomes so cost prohibitive that people are like, well, I just gonna deal with it the way I'm gonna deal with it when I get to
Mhm.
that situation, unfortunately, or trying to figure out maybe how to pay for it out of assets that they've accumulated for retirement, or like I said, the other option would be to qualify for Medicaid, if that is kind of the alternatives for that. But if you have enough time horizon to the particular goal, or not goal, but having a long-term care situation a little bit later on, maybe you plan accordingly with getting a long-term care policy, or finding some other options and to cover care when you're going to need it in the future.
All right. That's sobering, but it's something we need to know about. So,
Yes.
um, your point number 7, you say we need to discuss the importance of planning.
Yeah. So you don't want to get caught um unaware of the situation. Like I said, until you're actually in it or have experienced it or know somebody, um, it may not be one of those things that are on your radar. I help people with a lot of different things with their financial lives. Number one, of course, how do I retire at a decent age and make enough money to sustain myself for a long period of time in retirement? And sometimes this healthcare situation does not come on the radar until the fact that you have to pay for healthcare in retirement. And then, of course, the next step being long-term care. Uh, Basically, the stages and independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing care, end of life care, whatever you have to do with So sometimes it's not on people's radar, but it is very important to start having these conversations with your family, or if you have aging parents and they're in a situation where they haven't gotten to that stage where they need care, really talk to them about what's the game plan. Do you have anything in place? How you think you're going to pay for this if you don't? Because sometimes as children we need to figure out how we would need to care for mom or dad in a situation where the nursing home care or long-term care event happens. Same thing with our own planning. Do what would happen if we have kids or if we don't have kids. I have a lot of single women that I take care of. I have to have this conversation. Is that if you have a long-term care situation and you don't have immediate family, who's going to take care of you? How are you going to pay for it? I know it's one of those hard conversations that people don't want to have, because you have to kind of think about your mortality at that point, what's going to happen. But the sooner you have the conversations, the better. So you're not in it at the same time trying to make those decisions and figure it out, and not having a roadmap or a game plan to order to pay for it and what type of things that you need to think about in a long-term care event.
It's interesting that you should mention that, because I have a daughter who's 44 and has chosen not to have children. And it's
Okay.
not something that I have ever dared to ask why she made that decision. But it's her choice. But in the past couple of months, I actually heard her say to me, I'm starting to realize that the fact that we don't have children, I'm listening to my coworkers talk about, situations, and they're relying on their children for things, and I'm not going to have any kids to help me out.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of feeling sad for her over that, but it was, probably a little bit late at 44 to think about that.
to think about that, not having kids. But that's, and I think same thing with just if they're married or even single, not having somebody in a situation where you have to kind of do some future planning, like, okay, who's going to be here to take care of me if my spouse is not here, if you're married, or I'm by myself and I don't have children. I read a book a while ago. I can't remember the name, but um, I think it was planning for the single female or something like that.
Mhm.
And I read it because, of course, that's what I deal with. And she had befriended, like in the community, one of the older ladies in the community had befriended a younger um, neighbor. And so the neighbor was able to kind of take care of some of these things. Not to say that the that is very gracious, of course, of a
Mhm.
neighbor to do so, but a lot of that is happening as well. Some of the things that I have been reading, of course, as I've been going through this on my own, and also advising people, is that legislation, we have to kind of figure out what needs to happen in order to take care of our elderly in this country, either through the long-term care or facilities, and how that's going to need to change. They're understaffed. They're not, a lot of them may or may not be um, very good facilities. Like I was explaining to you before the call, just going and interviewing and seeing what's out there sometimes is a little sobering on, is this it
Mhm.
type of thing. And then also really just a lot of what I've been reading is that community care is coming back as an option, where people are, I wouldn't say communes, but a community type where
Mhm.
people are taking care of each other, or have some type of kind of I guess inherited family because of the community. If you are able if you need someone and you don't have someone, I've seen generational care come back, where there's the generational home where grandparents and great grandparents are now in homes, in order to kind of take care of each other as well. So the narrative is changing a little bit as we kind of think about the aging population. Definitely a lot more needs to be done. This is kind of my soapbox to share that it needs to work. And reading an article recently, I believe it was in either Forbes or New York Times, is that it talked about the long-term care situation in this country needs to be fixed, and then how is it going to be fixed, and who's going to fix it. And so, I definitely encourage people to, write to Congress people if they are in a situation where they don't believe care is efficient or sufficient for in their communities, to
Mhm.
really get those conversations started of the importance of planning and the importance of taking care of our aging population.
Yes, what you're saying is we had a question that came in that was discussing just that. She said, as we boomers age, there's going to be such a growing need for long-term care, and I'm not sure we have enough resources, either human or facility. What
Mhm.
trends do you see coming that might improve long-term care? So I normally would say the question for the end, but it fits right into what you're talking about here.
Yeah,
So do you see any
exactly.
trends, or are you just at the point of we're saying something has to be done?
Yeah, I think we're at the point now where a lot of the articles that I'm reading is that they know there's an issue and there's a problem and it needs to be fixed. So we're probably just right at the beginning stages of trying to figure this out. But to the point of that question is that yes, as like I said, the big blocks of baby boomers go through the system and it's going to need care. It's going to put more pressure on it. Right now, what I'm seeing is that there's still lack of proper staffing in a lot of these facilities, and it's only going to increasingly put pressure on the system as large blocks, like I said, of baby boomers age into a long-term care situation. So hopefully, as things start to I guess the seams start to burst. We
Hmm.
need to address it. Yeah, unfortunately, that happens sometimes, and until stuff gets really bad, we're not addressing it. But I think at some point it'll start getting that way, and we'll start doing it. But I think it's been identified that yes, it's going to be an issue, and that we do need to address it sooner rather than later.
Well, I can certainly tell you that one of the biggest concerns I had with managing my mother's long-term care was the unreliability of her facility's staffing levels. And I think
Yes.
part of that situation was because we were during COVID, but
Hmm.
the organization, remember I said that they were in a continuing care situation. So when they came in under the independent living part, the organization had originally promised them that
Hmm.
um, they were reliably secure, that um, there was always going to be plenty of staff,
Hmm.
and they would be taken care of. But my mother, once she got into uh, the hospice situation, she was frequently complaining about abuse, neglect,
Mm.
unmet needs, and incompetent workers. She would
Mhm.
tell me that they weren't feeding her, or that no one came to
Oh.
push her wheelchair to the dining room, or
Mhm.
that she was being physically abused, um,
Mm.
or that
Yeah.
it would take 30 minutes from when she pushed her call button until someone came to help her go to the bathroom.
Mhm.
Now, my mother did have some dementia as
Yeah.
in this last year to 18 months. So
Mhm.
I, from a long distance, had quite a situation of trying to figure out what stories she told me were real and
Mhm.
what stories did she kind of make
Yeah.
up. And I
Mhm.
tried a lot of times to call the staff and talk to
Mhm.
them, but I was never ever positive that they were not covering their rears, that they might be
Yeah.
telling me, oh, she's just imagining that, but maybe she wasn't. It was a very scary
Yeah.
thing for me because I didn't know what exactly
Mhm.
was happening, and due to COVID, I couldn't go there.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Exactly.
I had to try to balance the story she told me against my awareness that she frequently misunderstood situations and then therefore accidentally fabricated stories that were close enough to the truth that I would kind of believe them, and I would tell them to my brother, and he would go, "Oh, come on, Ann, that could not have happened." So it took more than one kid to figure out what was going
Yeah,
on.
exactly. But unfortunately, some of those stories could be true. You hear about
Right. And the thing
those
that
type of things
surprised me
happen in
was that
facilities. Yeah.
they didn't really have any RNs or LPNs. Mostly they had CNAs, certified nursing
Okay.
assistants,
Yeah.
and then they had care workers. And
Hmm.
considering that this was such a ritzy, fancy place that they lived, that they bought into, I was
Hmm.
really surprised at the limited capabilities that they had in care uh, when she got to the point of needing this care.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you have to be aware of, the
Mm-hmm.
different, as I mentioned, the different stages of it. Now in our particular situation is that it seems as though when we move to a hospice situation, is that she's getting more care
Mm-hmm.
and than she was in assisted living facility, because Medicaid is going to pay because she is a Medicaid bed, and so that was kind of the challenge too that I had mentioned before, is finding a qualified bed who would take a Medicaid patient for that. But once hospice is back to kind of that Medicare conversation, you get the first 100 days of Medicare covering long-term care, but part because of if you have Part A, which most people, if they've worked paid into Part A, Medicare, sorry, will cover hospice care. So they'll
Mm-hmm.
cover hospice care at 100%. So with that, in my mother's situation is that she's getting an extra layer of care with the hospice care because it's covered through Part A. So now she has a nurse coming in a few days a week, bathing, things like that. Some other staff, nutritionist, all of these things. So it seems as though, unfortunately, the care is better when you're in a hospice situation than you're just in a regular assisted living facility, unfortunately. And that's kind of I guess, the irony of it. I guess they figured, at some point you're checking out and you don't need that level of care anymore. I don't know. But that's what we have been seeing, is that because of the situation, she's actually getting more care
Well,
than
I'm
she was
happy about that.
before. Yeah, I'm
Right.
happy about that too. I wish it was better because when she was in the other facility, that she would got the same level of care. So that, yeah, and that's one of the things too, is that you have to have the qualified people in there and not just CNAs. You do have to have, LPNs and registered nurses and all of those. And people are just so short staffed in a lot of these facilities as it stands now. And like you said, just to imagine as more boomers age into a long-term care situation where we're going to be. So hopefully the conversation is being looked at from a legislative standpoint on what can be done
Mm-hmm.
to take care of the seniors in our population for that. I know a lot of people, stomp on a lot of different things during election years, but hopefully that's one of the conversations that people will start to take a look at. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security is always on the agenda for that. Hopefully, this would be part of that narrative that people will start to talk about.
All right. Well, I don't have any more comments or questions. I've integrated the ones that I had, which were two of them, into
Mhm.
our discussion already. So, is is there anything else that you would like to recommend as far as resources for people to look at?
Yeah, I mean, resources. I mean, if you go to AARP, it has a tremendous resources for um, for aging seniors, and also talking about, the long-term care and our insurances and kind of what you expect. So, aarp.org is always a good site with a lot of information on not just the long-term care, but also retirement planning and Social Security and a variety of different things that boomers need to know about. So I always recommend AARP as a resource. If you want to know more about kind of what Medicare covers and kind of the Medicaid, you can also go to Medicare.gov, and also Centers for Medicare Services. I think it's CMS. and just kind of getting a chance to know what is covered and what's not in a situation. So you start planning. So if that,
Mhm.
knowing that there's 100 days that you have there, knowing that Part A hospice is covered with Part A, and then where do you need to fall in terms of taking care of your aging parent or yourself, start thinking about long-term care insurance. So maybe getting some quotes from one of your um, local long-term care agents to do that.
Mhm.
If you don't know where to start, I can also do that as well because I do provide that as a service for my clients as well, with looking at some policies to see where where you stand in terms of what the premiums could be for that. And then really, having the conversations with your family members. So if parents talking to kids, kids talking to parents, I always tell people, during the holidays, I know it's probably not a good time to have these conversations, but that's where most of the
But
people are
we can
all
get people together
together.
then. Right.
Exactly. And so maybe one of those days you kind of talk about this situation on that, who's going to take care of mom, or who's going to take care of us, or like I said, parents and kids, kids and parents, whoever, and having that conversation when you have most of the people together as well. This could be a good time to talk about if you don't have an estate plan. I know we've had a conversation about that too before, Ann, but who's going to be your power of attorney? Who's going to have these, your healthcare directives to make these decisions um, in the event that a long-term care situation, if you, especially you have a larger family, everybody has their input on it, but only one or two people can actually make those decisions.
Mhm.
So you want to plan carefully on who that could be. That could be your own kids. It could be your brother, your sister. It could be an outside source if people don't have. I have, like I said, I take care of a lot of single women. Maybe they don't have family that they want to do that. So maybe a outside party that could do that as well. There are facilities or um, companies and agencies that do that, act as power of attorneys and things like that if you don't have people in your ecosystem that would perform those duties for you. So really, just as anything, it's all about financial planning. This is part of your financial plan, making sure you know what needs to happen in the event that a long-term care situation, who's going to make the decisions for you, what the cost may be, and then either home care or facility, what your needs and your wishes are. Like I said, parents and kids and parents having these conversations sooner rather than later.
All right. Well, as usual, it's been great talking to you, and um, you've been full of wonderful information. So I thank you for that and for being my guest and for providing us with your own personal story as well as the facts. I think it's always, we like, as human beings, I think we respond well to stories. So,
Yes.
that that probably personalizes it and makes it something that people might remember better. So I don't have any more questions for you, but I do look forward to our next discussion. And I know your schedule is getting busy, that you had to reschedule some trips because of your mother. So I'm going to say that normally we would have our next call on Thursday, September 22nd, but I think our listeners will have to watch on Facebook and other places where I'll post information as we get closer into September, because I'm not sure if you can definitively say at this time what your schedule is.
Yeah, we will definitely keep people posted on that. But yes, next month probably revisit life insurance because it is Life Insurance Awareness Month for September. So we'll probably get into that, touch that again, as a conversation.
Excellent. It's always a topic that we need to talk about. I love the conversation that we had about it a few years ago, where you said, do we really need it or not? Because you brought up some wonderful, wonderful points of view that a lot of people think, oh, I don't have children anymore that I have to take care of with my life insurance, so I don't really need life insurance because my kids are adults, they don't need me.
Exactly.
But that's not the only reason to have life insurance, as you will tell us next week. So,
Exactly.
I if there's anything else that you want to say before we wrap up the call, you have the floor here.
Nope, I think we covered everything. I cannot stress enough
All right.
the importance of this topic, though. That's why
Right.
I really wanted to make sure that we talked about this. Like I said, using my voice as a platform on this, going through it in real time, really makes it real. And I wanted to make sure I shared it with people because it is very important. And when you're kind of faced with it, and the decisions you have to make, and like I said, in real time, it really makes you think like, hey, I could have, or we could have did as a family, a little bit more pre-planning on what needs to happen on that. So I want to make sure I encourage people to start thinking about it, having those conversations. We're coming up on the holidays, what they call the Burr months, starting next week. So when you get with family, Christmas, no, Thanksgiving time frame, I don't want it to be a morbid conversation,
Mhm.
but this is important conversations to have
It
when
is.
you have groups of people together as well. So everybody's on the same page, especially if you're from a larger family. Just give people the viewpoints and opinions, because as you have aging parents, that's kind of the key. Is that sometimes they don't share with you a lot of
Mhm.
information, and you find things out a little bit later. So having the conversation so you can get some of the things out in the open and know where things are. Same thing with your kids. Start having conversations with your own kids on, okay, this is what I want to see happen in the event that a long-term care occurs, or you have to make a decision regarding my health situation through a healthcare proxy. So just keeping everybody informed and having a game plan is what I really stress the importance of the conversation.
Excellent. And now I have a couple messages for our audience. First of all, I want to thank them for joining us for this great call and remind them that if they have questions after the call, they can feel free to email you, Pam, at
Mhm.
Pamela@jacksonsams.com. I always like to spell that, JACKSONSAMS.com, or go to her website, jacksonsams.com. And if you'd like to know more about the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, check out our website at nabbw.com and our Facebook page at facebook.com/nabbw. I tend to put latest news things on the Facebook page as well as on the website because I'm not sure. I guess I figured that the more places I put the information, the better.
Exactly.
So that's all I have. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.
Yes,
And
thanks for
thank you
having me
again,
in.
Pam.
Alrighty, take care.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye.